The state's next witness, I'd like to offer two exhibits into the record that were published yesterday, exhibits 75 and 267.
Those are received.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls John Edwards.
Stand there for a second. Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. And if you wouldn't mind, we have been having witnesses remove their masks. If you're comfortable with that, we prefer that so we can hear you a little better.
Absolutely.
And if you could pull up a little bit to the microphone.
Right.
And start by stating your full name, spelling each of your names.
My name is John Curtis Edwards, JON-CURTISEDWARDS.
Mr.
Thank you,
Sushik.
Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please tell the jury your occupation?
Minneapolis Police Sergeant,
How long have you held that position?
2007, so approximately 14 years.
Not as a sergeant, but as a police officer for 14 years?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you started as a police officer in 2007. Did you start with the Minneapolis Police Department?
I started as a cadet in the cadet program.
All right. But that was your first job in law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You started as a cadet. Describe that experience, if you would.
The cadet program is a curriculum designed for those who have graduated college from accredited college to undergo more criminal justice and law classes, as well as partake in skills, as well as various scenario-based simulations pertaining to law enforcement. It's a curriculum designed with the end goal of becoming post-certified by the Post Board.
And the post is the Police Officer Standards and Training Board, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's how you get your license to be a police officer in the state of Minnesota, correct?
Correct. After obtaining that, you can be a licensed peace officer in the state of Minnesota.
And you occasionally take...
Sorry, can you pull up just a little bit?
Oh, yes. Not a
That
problem.
doesn't move very well, unfortunately.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Do you occasionally take continuing education credits to keep your license current?
Correct.
You do that as part of in-service training, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So after you graduated from the academy and became post-certified, what was your job duties?
Upon graduating the academy, you are a new officer on FTO.
What do you mean by FTO?
Every new officer is assigned a FTO, which is a field training officer, and that is usually a veteran officer who you, for about 4 to 5 months, you're on rotation with a new or with a veteran officer as you learn the ropes.
After you completed your field training, then did you become a patrol officer?
Yes, sir.
And can you please share with the jury the different places within Minneapolis that you were assigned as a patrol officer?
So I finished my FTO rotation in the 3rd Precinct, South Minneapolis. From there, I went and was assigned to the 5th Precinct, and that is also South Minneapolis, located off of 31st and Nicollet, where I was a patrol 911 responder. And I primarily worked the night shifts. I worked middle watch shift and our dog watch shift. Our dog watch shift just pretty much means overnights. We started at the nighttime and the shift ends, when the sun comes up. So my journey started on the night shifts in the 5th Precinct.
Now, through the course of your MPD career, you've been assigned to different units or teams, is that right?
Yes, sir.
One of those was a community response team, is that right?
Yes. I did approximately maybe a year and a half in our CERT team, community response team. That is a unit that's not bound by 911 patrol. That is a unit that's primarily focused on crime patterns that are happening within that precinct. So we did a lot of burglary suppression, robbery suppression, prostitution, things of that nature that were highly focused on specific crimes in that precinct.
You've also been assigned to the community engagement unit, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And could you describe what that unit is?
Let me take some water for this. So I was in the community engagement unit for approximately 2 years. Now that unit was a unit that derived from former President Obama's 21st Century Policing Initiative, which pretty much means more community-oriented policing. And that unit that I was a part of was primarily focused on the specific needs of the community. So I worked directly with members of the community, things of like neighborhood watch organizations, a lot of meetings, but it was specific to specific needs of the community. And we weren't 911 patrol.
And after you finished that assignment, you mentioned that your current rank is that of sergeant, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
On leave right now.
And you had to take a test to be a sergeant and then get selected, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so now you're a patrol sergeant. Where are you currently assigned?
I am on leave right now.
Prior to that, immediately prior to starting your leave, what
I was assigned to the 3rd Precinct dog watch shift, the overnight shift.
Now, when you're working as a shift sergeant, you typically wear a uniform,
Yes, sir.
outfitted with a body-worn camera.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a partner?
No. I'm one of 3 sergeants that are on that shift, though, but no partner.
Are you assigned a car?
Yes, sir.
When you ride, then you ride solo?
Yes, sir.
Now, as a Minneapolis police officer, you've signed a certification that you're familiar with various Minneapolis Police Department policies, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And as part of that, in addition to all of the policies that have been introduced, we're just going to focus on that of critical incident response, all right? Now, when we, looking back to May 2020, you were supervising the dog watch shift. Were you working on May 25, 2020?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And when do you recall beginning your shift?
Like I said, I'm the dog watch shift. Our shift started at 20-30 hours, which is 8:30 p.m.
And what's the first thing you do when you start the shift?
First thing I do is conduct roll call with my officers.
Describe what the roll call involves.
Roll call is basically attendance, making sure all the officers are there, everybody's there, accounted for, they're ready to work. It's a time where we pass along pertinent information about what has gone on during the day, or maybe what crime patterns and things to be aware of. And if the officers have anything that needs to be brought to the table, they can as well. Roll call concludes with me giving the officers their squad assignments and then sending them on their way so that they can start answering 911 calls.
And do you typically receive information from the previous shifts that you can pass it along to the officers you're sending out in your shift?
Sometimes. Sometimes, yeah.
You're generally familiar with the officers you personally supervise?
Yes.
And other officers within the 3rd Precinct? Are you familiar with other officers in the 3rd Precinct who are not necessarily on your specific shift?
Oh, yes, yes.
Are you familiar with an individual named Derek Chauvin?
Not personally, but I do know who he is.
Okay. Do you believe you'd recognize him if you saw him?
Absolutely.
Do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Would you please point to him and... Thank you. Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant? How do you know him?
Like I said, I don't know him personally. We worked out of the same building, but we worked on different shifts. I wasn't his direct supervisor.
Sort of a name and face recognition.
Absolutely.
Never socialized outside of work?
No.
Are you familiar with an officer named Tu Tao?
Yes, I know who he is.
Okay. Is it the same nature, basically the same type of relationship as the defendant?
Yes, we worked out of the same building, but we were on different shifts.
And Thomas Lane?
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship with Thomas Lane?
He was also on the mid-watch shift, but Thomas Lane did do a rotation when they were new on my shift, and I believe he was on my shift for about a month when he was, I think it was probably his second month on the job.
Have you ever interacted with him outside of a work setting?
No, sir.
And Alexander King?
Him as well. Same relation. He and Officer Lane were both on my shift for approximately a month, and I believe that was also his second month of being on the job.
So I'd like
That was
to...
while they were on their FTO rotation. They rotate between different shifts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to then bring you back to that roll call on the date of the question. Did you receive a telephone call around roll call time?
I believe the phone call was shortly, just as roll call concluded, yes.
And who was that phone call from?
I received a phone call from Sergeant Pluger, who was the mid-watch sergeant.
Do you recall what Sergeant Pluger, let me back up. Did Sergeant Pluger give you information that you relied upon to take further steps in your duties that night?
Yes.
Okay. What did Sergeant Pluger tell you?
Sergeant Pluger informed me that he was at the hospital at that time, and he was with a male that he described may or may not live. Later on in the night, I found out that that male was Mr. Floyd. He said he was down there at the hospital. He asked me if I would be willing to respond to the incident location of 38th in Chicago because he was tied up at the hospital at the time. He asked me if I would respond down there just to make sure, just in case we had to secure that area and make contact with any of his officers that were there on scene still, because this had the potential to be a possible critical incident.
Can you describe then what you mean by critical incident?
Usually an incident, an officer-involved incident where either the officer or somebody else has died, or an officer or somebody else has suffered great bodily harm that later led to death.
And based on your knowledge of Minneapolis Police Department policy, what is supposed to happen if there is a critical incident with the crime scene and with the participants?
A crime scene is supposed to be secured, which means locked down, and that is for the purpose to preserve any evidence that is there. The involved parties or the involved officers usually are chilling and awaiting escort sergeants so that they can be escorted to an interview room downtown. Appropriate notifications are made. IA, homicide, if you will, the upper administration. The area is canvassed, which just means there's a designated amount of officers that are searching the area looking for any witnesses that can give a synopsis of what they saw. And then we wait for the investigators to get there, car 21, and pretty much wait for further information from some of the superiors.
Do you take any steps with respect to body-worn cameras and ensuring that those are activated?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
And ensure that everybody's body-worn cameras are active and running at all times.